Ashley Fuqua. I'm the elementary student assistant counselor, and my office is actually here at Shades, but I serve all 3 elementary schools.
I'm Prum. I'm the student assistance counselor at the middle school. We are all wearing our t-shirts for the eclipse, so that's why I'm not dressed up. I'm sorry. But Ashley and I work as student assistance counselors. There's also one at the high school, Katie Smith, and we really work in tandem with school counselors to support student needs, and in particular can kind of have more time to dig into the more significant mental health concerns at the school. So we have done this presentation before, and we tweaked it a little for our group today. So please, we're informal. Ask any questions you like. We'll take questions at the end. But yeah.
So we'll be talking specifically about anxiety. We're going to talk about what is anxiety, what it looks like, how y'all can help your kids, as well as when you feel it's too much, where to go to next. So we're going to begin with anxiety versus worry. Everybody has worry. Everybody has a little bit of anxiety. It's not totally unusual for anybody to feel this way. Like if you're running late to work due to an accident or turning 65 and that traffic is absolutely at a crawl, that is typical anxiety. It becomes more anxiety diagnosis if it is affecting your daily life, and it's not just in your mind, it's also impacting your body as well.
So, we hear, especially getting into the middle and high school, we hear a lot of kids throwing out, like, I have anxiety, or like, trying to kind of self-diagnose. And one thing that we really do is to really try to understand ourselves and help students understand the difference between like normal, healthy worry that can be really motivating, and then actual kind of debilitating anxiety. It's kind of a fine line.
So what it might look like in children. So we are talking about physical symptoms. A tummy ache, yes, it is real, and that's due to anxiety. A headache. They might grind their teeth. So if you go to the dentist and they're saying, hey, grinding teeth might need a night guard. We're talking about avoidance. So they don't want to try something new. Also something that they go to every day, baseball, softball, football, they don't want to do anymore. They lose interest or outright don't want to hang out with those friends. Trouble focusing, that can be tricky because there are so many other things going on. Irritability and anger and physical aggression. They may yell more. Y'all know your kids, so you're going to see those little bitty changes. Asking repetitive questions, insomnia, so their mind's not stopping, right? It's running and running. So they have question upon question upon question, and then they can't sleep at night because they're thinking about not only their previous day, but everything going on tomorrow. Disruptive behaviors, clinginess, and perfectionism. So they're trying to be that perfect so that they can prevent the mistakes, prevent what might happen if something goes wrong. So when you think of a child with anxiety, you have this picture in your head, right? It might be next to mom saying, I don't want to do this, I'm really nervous, I'm really scared. However, anxiety can also present in these other ways, right? Anger and irritability. I like to think of anger as this big umbrella, and there's so much more going on underneath it. So if your child is even, you'll see those differences. Your mom's got that gut instinct, and you'll see those little bitty tales of like something more is going on. This is a video that shows overall, and I'm going to let this play for y'all.
Anxiety. We all have it. It is a part of our primal brain we inherited from our early ancestors. It helps them survive real threats, like being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. It is basically an early warning system, like a smoke detector in your brain. When the warning system is triggered by an actual threat to your safety, a signal is sent out to your body to fight or flee. And when you feel you cannot do either, you freeze. So how does this apply to you now? Anxiety is all about your perceived threat of danger. School isn't supposed to be dangerous though, right? Meet Emily. She loves sports, does well in her classes, and laughs a lot. No one close to her knows that she has anxiety. Sometimes the anxiety helps her, like when she's playing basketball. Even though she gets nervous, it can help her to be in the moment, to make those important shots. Sometimes the anxiety Emily feels isn't so helpful. Instead, it's downright scary. This happened one day when she felt uncomfortable in class. She thought everyone was looking at her. And when she was called on to answer a question, she was sure she sounded stupid. Emily thought about it the rest of the day. Her friends found her crying in the bathroom and she couldn't explain exactly what was wrong. She just kept saying that her chest hurt. Emily was having a panic attack. Remember, some amount of anxiety is good and normal for everyday life. It comes in many different forms and can look and feel different for everyone. For some people, they may sweat and feel their heart race, while others might get a headache and notice that their mouth is dry. But when does experiencing anxiety cross the line from good to bad? The key to that question is whether anxiety is regularly interfering with your life or making you miserable. This may mean that you think about stopping the activities you used to enjoy, or become afraid to engage in new experiences. If anxiety reaches this level, talk to a trusted adult. It takes courage to reach out. Counselors can help you work through negative thoughts that may be keeping you stuck. Together, you will come up with new, more helpful thoughts that can help you better manage your anxiety.
That video because it was a good kind of simple overview of where anxiety comes from and how it causes that fight, flight, or freeze response. That can be really adaptive and functional, but it can also go overboard in our children and cause them to miss out on some really great experiences that they need to have. So we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about what we as parents can do. This is a little bit of an overview, so we're going to talk about how to connect and validate, how to name the worry, helping your child develop coping strategies as they get older, resisting the urge to let your kids avoid things, modeling healthy coping yourself, using devices, sleep, and then professional help. Okay, so the first thing we want to do when we notice that our child is feeling anxious is to really connect with them. You know this, but when our kids are dysregulated, they can't hear us. They're not going to be able to hear, calm down, everything's going to be fine, or even a directive. So the best thing that can help them to calm is to know that you are seeing them and that you're with them. I'm here with you. So really connecting, and you know best how your child experiences that connection. It depends on age, but here's some examples are hugging, eye contact, just listening and suspending any advice giving, okay? Being curious about what's going on in their head. You can even name kind of what you're seeing. So like, gosh, I'm seeing your fist really balled up. Like I can see something's going on. So you're also naming the emotions that you're seeing. Some kids who are older or more verbal have an easier time putting words to their feelings. So they might be able to say, I'm feeling really mad. A lot of our kids can't do that, even into the upper elementary grade, especially in the moment. So you can name that for them, name what you're seeing, and then so one thing you can do is kind of name the worry and some people call it a worry monster. We're not huge fans of using monster language, but naming the worry, giving it like a real human name or being goofy about it, that's one thing you can do. But also normalizing where it's okay to be anxious. Like it's okay to worry about this. This is something new. But really trying to like connect and validate. Dan Siegel is a writer. You might have read some of his books. Whole Brain Child is his first one. But he always says connect before doing anything else, and he has some great language this is a worry graphic. There's so many of these on the internet, but we like this one. We have one printed out in our home. I have elementary age kids. It's in the middle of our house, and so we walk by it every day. We use it. We talk about it. But it can be really helpful. Again, if they are very dysregulated, they're not going to be able to use this. But this can be pulled out when you kind of circle back to that moment after they're calm and use it as kind of a tool to say, like, what are you feeling? Like, which one? It can also be used just to build their knowledge of emotion language, which is one of the things that's really important. Because the biggest thing we want our kids to be able to do is know what they're feeling when they're feeling it, because that's half the battle. So if they are reading a book, one of the things you can do if you're reading a picture book is to pull this out and say, what do you think this character is feeling right now? So it builds that emotion language, and it also builds empathy too. So we use these a lot in the counseling room, have them hung up, but they're good to have at home too. Okay, so this is a really quick clip of Becky. Dr. Becky, you might have also read her book, but she's a pretty famous child psychologist who has written a book called Good Inside. She has a podcast. But this is her talking about that connection moment.
When your child is feeling anxious, any attempt to convince them out of the anxiety with words like, you're going to be fine, you're going to have fun, will only make them more anxious, because a child feels like a parent is scared of the very feeling they're feeling. Instead, validate and show your belief in their coping. You're feeling nervous. That's okay, I get that. Here's what I know. We'll get through this together.
So I really like how she said that, because it's so easy for us as parents to say, you're going to be fine, it's going to be so much fun. And I do think there's a place for those words, but we can't say that before we really connect with them and validate what they're feeling. So the key is to do that first. So after we validate and ongoing, we want to give our kids a really good toolbox for coping. So we want them to have a number of tools that they can pull out when they're not feeling great, that they can use to cope.
So they have to learn their body. They have to learn what works, okay? So we have to teach them their cues and triggers. You know, do you feel your heart pitter-pattering? Are your fists really balled up really tight? Are you wanting to run? A good bit of the teaching coping skills and coping mechanisms involves you as the parent watching what's happening with your child and pointing it out to them in their language so that we can implement coping strategies. My 4-year-old is a very physical, very active child, and so I have to use active coping mechanisms when he is feeling those big emotions. So it's important, is your child one that internalizes and withdraws? So what can we provide for them? So some coping strategies, this is not one thing fits everybody. This is multiple things. We have the deep breathing. That I would give for everybody. I teach them to breathe in through their nose and out through their mouth. You can teach them box breathing. These tools are really help to settle them, and it's the thing that is most achievable in that moment. You don't necessarily can have your kid running around the park, right, around everybody else. You can't necessarily have them sit down and draw when you're out in the middle of the grocery store. But breathing is that first thing that we can start with. Grounding exercises, so that teaches kids what is around them in present time and teaches them to focus on the here and now. So what are your feet touching at this moment? What are your hands touching at this moment?
And that's one thing we do with grounding is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can touch, and then 1 thing you can taste, which sometimes we can give them a Jolly Rancher or something to ground. But that really brings them to the here and now.
Mindfulness, and then sensory items in a basket, and movement and exercise. Once again, most of this you can have at home in an area. For them, there are other things like movement and exercise. I will tell y'all that there's a woman called Emily Nagasaki that really talks about the stress cycle and how when you begin to work up, it's important that you get that movement going. So I truly do believe in movement. So whether it's standing there and you just circling your arms, or taking a run or a walk, all of those are options. For your more internal internal child that doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to be physical. We have the drawing, listening, and journaling. I like to give kids, especially the older kids, I don't call it journaling anymore because they think of your diary, this is how my day is, right? I call it a dump journal. And it's where you're allowed to dump all of your thoughts. And so you can write one run-on sentence for 2 pages. You can draw if you need to. You can scratch up the whole paper. You can use colored pencils. It's their choice, but it's their safe space to really get all of those running thoughts and feelings out. And that in and of itself can take it on. So that's why I say it's drawing, listening, and it's dumping, because the purpose is not for anybody to read. It is really to get it out and for them not to read it.
One thing that you can do at bedtime too is, and this works for as well, but really to dump everything that's kind of on your mind and worrying onto it. Or just listing it. I think it's really helpful at bedtime.
And then limit exposure to news and phone alerts. We'll go more in depth, but we are in an ever-connected world. Everything, around us, we can be sitting here and one of those government alerts can go off, or someone's phone dings, and I think we all have that same response to whose phone is vibrating or dinging. Is it mine? And kids are going to end up picking up on that, but I'll go for the next one. Resist avoidance. So we're both moms, so we totally understand the wanting to help and save your child when they are struggling. However, some of the greatest things come out of when push comes to shove and we're having to deal with something that's tough. When worry does become bigger and kids begin to avoid, it might be school, it might be a sport, it might be just going over to anybody's house or leaving the house. It's important that we push them appropriately to try it. It's also appropriate that we, I guess when they call and they say they want to go home or they want to leave right then, we continue to let them experience what they're feeling, because that's when they build coping skills. If you can remember when they were all learning to walk, we couldn't just keep them from falling on their bottom. I have a 1-year-old, so she's right into the mix of everything, running into the walls, into her brother. It's all in the way, and this is one of those same things. They're learning how to cope with their big emotions. They're learning in a world that has a lot of anxiety and stress how to cope with it on a daily basis, and they have to figure that out with your help. Next, preparation is key. So a lot of they call it an elementary pre-correction. So preparing them for, hey, this is what's coming next. This is what's going on. What can we do when we feel this? What can we do if something presents in a way that we're uncomfortable and we don't want to? Who are your people to talk to when it gets to be too much and you can't sit there or you can't participate anymore? Who can you turn to? Next is model healthy coping. All right, so this is a little bit about you. Our kids learn more from social learning than they do most anything. They are learning how you talk on the phone. They learn how you interact with other adults and other people by how you and your spouse are talking to each other. They are picking up on every little thing. So it's important that you own your emotions, and if you have a strong reaction to something, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, acknowledge and say, hey, I'll either try better next time, or mommy's feeling sad. Mommy's feeling this. Normalize talking about it, whether it's through reading, like Anna Kate mentioned a minute ago, or telling a story. We're big on bedtime stories in my house, so I make up stories that happened when we were kids. Some are true, some are a little extra, but it's always about resilience and building and working through something. So be intentional with that time when you're spending it, whether it's reading a story or telling a story. You can make something more out of it. There's also the visual, like the coping, the chart, fidgets and comfort items, whether it's a Bobo or a blanket. Sorry, Bobo is my child's dog, stuffed dog. So a teddy bear or a blanket, all right? Or I keep fidgets in my purse or car. I'm sure we'll all do something like that. Sometimes it's a drink of water, too. It can be simply a water fountain. Check-in system. Rosebud thorn, high-low buffalo, rainbows and storm clouds. Have that conversation, check in with your kid. It can be simple when you pick them up and you're on your way home, or after a really long day right before they go to bed. What was your high? What was your low? If I say buffalo, that means something random and spur of the moment. In growth mindset, like I said, teaching that resiliency and teaching them that you are going to make mistakes, things are going to be uncomfortable, but there is something afterwards, and teaching them that you will grow through it. Every moment, in my opinion, is a learning and a teachable moment. It's all in how you want to do it. So here is a nice graphic that has a lot of different ways that we can cope. And I would say I like to do affirmations in the morning. There's a doggy land song called Affirmations, and we play it every morning where it's a song, and we listen to it before school, and it just automatically can start your day off really well. And there are all these different things on Apple Music, Spotify, all of it, where you can start just a simple song because they're absorbing it through everything.
Okay, we're going to touch on this. I know we've all heard a lot about cell phones and social media. Dr. Story has presented on this multiple times and done a great job. I think some of those videos are maybe on the site to help you with the website. But there's research that shows that social media impacts our older elementary and middle school kids the most. We know not all of your children have access to social media and cell phones, so we're going to talk a little bit about devices in general. We really want to limit their ability to access apps and their daily amount of screen time. We all know the research on that. So just be sure you're using, even if they have an iPad or have access to a family iPad at home, that you're aware of what apps they're accessing, that they're using it in the main room of the house and not in their room. You know, YouTube is great for some things, but the stuff that pops up on YouTube can go down an ugly rabbit hole really quickly. Safari is same. So just be sure you're using that. And if you don't know how to have those automatic limits, you can look that up online really easily. If they do start having social media during elementary school, just be sure you're monitoring that constantly, daily. Removing devices from the bedroom at night is probably our biggest suggestion, especially at the middle school level. So many of our students have their phones right by their heads at night. And there's research that shows that kids who have their phones in their bedrooms overnight have increased anxiety and depression. That was a few years ago that came out.
And I'll say my daughter just turned 16, and she still has to turn every electronic device into my room before she goes to bed. I strongly believe in that.
And I think, again, not a lot of elementary kids don't have phones yet, but you can start these practices really young as you're starting to let them use your iPad or whatever, having that central charging station.
A switch. If they play with the switch, like the little Nintendo Switch, make sure that gets turned into you. I was finding out my daughter thought she could play she got her phone turned in, but she could still play her Switch.
Yeah, so those little decisions, if your family starts to have those patterns early on, it's a lot easier to implement them when they get their info down the road. Muting government alerts, there is a way, like even if some children get anxious when they hear those government alerts go off. There's a way to turn them off, so you can look that up. And then there's different apps to help that you can pay for to help monitor phones and things like that. But this is a big part, especially in middle and high. This is a huge contributor to our students with anxiety. So we definitely wanted to touch on it. Okay, sleep. So we all know sleep is a huge part of children's health. Their mental health, their physical health. So this is just a reminder that kids need a lot of sleep. Establishing a good nighttime routine that you do every day as much as you can. Having the same bedtime every day as much as you can. And then limiting that screen time an hour before bedtime is so important. If your child, if our kids have anxiety, they might have trouble falling asleep at night. And that's something and then that interferes with their day the next day. It's just a cycle. So that's when we want to start with the pediatrician to say, what do we need to do at night so that they can fall asleep? Okay, so that was a good segue. When to get help, we really want to look at how much the anxiety and worry is interfering with the day-to-day. Worry is healthy, normal. We don't want to remove every bit of stress in our kids' life because that's life. We want to teach them how to cope with it. But when it starts to interfere and when you feel like you have pulled out all of your tools and you're at a loss, we want to start thinking about getting professional help and starting with the pediatrician. So these are some things to notice. If you see a major shift, if you see a decrease, increase in wanting to go to their activities, wanting to go to school, a lot of school avoidance starts slowly, and with parents saying, it's okay, you can stay home for a mental health day this one day. And then it kind of builds on each other, and we see that more than you would think. So with school avoidance, if any of your children deal with that, or if you know other parents, encourage them to call the school like as soon as that starts, because a lot of times administrators or counselors can really intervene early and help with that rather than it getting to this problem. It builds on itself, bigger problem down the road. Certainly if you notice any self-harming behavior, so especially cutting is one thing that we see a lot, you want to get immediate help same day. That's extreme most of the time, but it does happen. We see a lot of it at the middle schools, so that's something that you want to immediately call the pediatrician about.
So like she said about the pediatrician, community resources, our first stop that we would suggest is your pediatrician. They have the most historical information regarding your child, as well as they can guide you really well, whether it's a medical concern or more. Okay, they're going to dive into the medical piece first, and we really want to rule that out. Obviously, you know, the counselors, the teachers, reach out to them, your administrators, and let them know what's going on. Sometimes we can all help put our brains together and figure out what's best. Next, we have the outside providers, the counselors, social workers, psychologists. Your pediatrician can supply you with a list of people that would take your insurance, as well as you can yourself look at psychologytoday.com or your work EAP. I think we sometimes can forget about that. Oftentimes you can get maybe spend less money going through your work EAP. And then the crisis center, this is their number, and then PERC. So PERC is the Psychiatric Intake Response Center at Children's. This is a line that you can call 7 to 11 every single day, and you'll talk to a licensed mental health professional, and they can provide you guidance on where to best help your child. And they can tell you emergency room, or here are some other resources as well.
It doesn't have to be a crisis for that. So if you or anyone in the community that you know of, like, they're just a really great resource. They have an ongoing, ever updated list of really resources all over the state. And you can tell them like insurance, location, and they will give you a really good list. One thing I wanted to mention is I wouldn't trust your gut, but I wouldn't wait until it gets awful before you do these things. If you're noticing patterns, like go ahead and talk to them, because it can take a long time to get in to see a counselor. So I would go ahead and ask the pediatrician and go ahead and contact the school counselor. There are things that we can do at the school level to help as well. We can also give you, we have a resource list with some things locally for providers. So if you think it's becoming a pattern, go ahead and start. And what we don't want to do is wait until it's kind of out of control, and then you're trying to get on a list that's a month long.
So this is resources continued. This is the book list. We discussed or mentioned the whole brain child. This is Becky Kennedy, the one that we saw in the video that I played. This is her book, The Good Inside. Under Pressure by Lisa Lorne.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite writers, especially on teens and especially girls. So she's written a lot.
And then Unstealthy, that is about a very connected world. And parents, what can we do to help our kids as we go through their looking at yourself world. And then contact information. So I'm actually Fuqua Elementary. This is Anna Kate Middle School, and then Katie Smith is at the high school. This QR code just has